Hello and welcome to Gin with Gwynne. I'm Oliver Gwynne, and this is where I give you my off the cuff and unrehearsed thoughts on marketing data and philosophy. This week, would you hire somebody to not shave their head or cut their nails and sit in silence in your garden? Because that's what people did if they were crazy, rich, and in the 18th century. 18th century, two major things are happening. We have the Industrial Revolution, where industrialization spreads across Europe and everywhere becomes factories and smoke and busy and noise. And at the same time, in relation to this, all these rich landowners um, become enveloped in Romanticism. So this intellectual and artistic movement that emphasizes sort of emotion and nature. And in this period, knighthood and knightly nostalgia becomes really, really popular, especially in Britain and Germany. All these rich people, they weren't just content with being rich, they wanted to see themselves as heirs to these noble traditions of sort of medieval knights, no matter how true or false that may actually be. And so what they did is they built fake castles in their gardens. Now, when I'm saying gardens, I'm not talking about a 6x4 with a little piece of grass. I'm talking about like huge grounds that they had in the backyards. If you've ever been to like a state manor or something, you know what I'm talking about. So they built mock castles to try and sort of physically tie themselves to the past. And they purposely would design these castles so that they looked like ruins. Like even at the time when they were brand new, they were designing them so they looked like ruins, so that they could try and say, "Oh yes, we're part of this ancient thing, and this is a castle from this kind of time." At the time, writers like Sir Walter Scott published Ivanhoe, and it sort of really helped to romanticize knights, medieval society, and the idea of sort of ruined castles as history and places of mystery, which I think they still are today. Some really famous examples of this are Hen- Henry Horace Walpole's Strawberry Hill, one of the earliest and most famous examples of a fake castle, and also Beckford's Fonteville Abbey, which I will put some pictures up somewhere. And as I said, this was all a reaction to the Industrial Revolution. If you were rich, you wanted to try and tie yourself to nature and to a simpler, more romantic time. And you can think of this as quite an early example of experience design. So one of the best people I follow on Instagram is former Disney Imagineer. You know, if you know me, you know I love my Disney. Joe Rody, who is like a genius. People say he designed a lot of Animal Kingdom. If you've ever been to Walt Disney World, Florida, and his Instagram is amazing. If he wants to publish that as a book, I'd buy that, even though it's available for free. He talks a lot about experience design and gives you all the sort of historical background to theme parks, because in many ways, building a fake castle in your backyard is a precursor to building a fake castle in a theme park, I guess. And he said, experience begins with our expectation. Our brain is mainly a predictive organ. When something is not what we expect, we notice it. And so that maybe highlights why these design environments were so powerful, because they disrupted the mundane of being a rich person in a huge house and created something sort of remarkable and fantasable. But some insane rich people went a bit further than that. They began to hire people to live in these fake castles or these fake underground cave or these fake treehouse terraces as hermits. Like real people were hired. They were given garments to make them look like a wizard, I guess, in our mind today. Um, and they were sort of hired to play this role of somebody who embodied solace and wisdom, and they were quite often asked to greet visitors and give them some sort of poems or some sort of thoughts on nature. In some cases, very weirdly, they were asked not to cut their hair or shave their or cut their nails or even talk to the service staff. They were giving meals and all this kind of stuff, but they weren't supposed to talk to anybody. They were supposed to live in solitude and contemplate nature. And I imagine they must have been talking to somebody, because why would you employ somebody, put them in your little castle, and then just like, I don't want you to ever talk to me. Just go live in that castle. You know, what would be the point in that? But this is an insane thing that people were doing back in the 18th century. So Charles Hamilton's Painshill Park Hermitage, Hamilton designed an artificial ruin and sought a hermit to live there, But the first person that he had only lasted 4 months doing this because he was found drinking in the local pub and that was not allowed. He was supposed to live just in that room where this rich person wanted to control his entire life, which is a normal thing to do. Sir William Gale's Hermitage, located in Staffordshire, the hermit was encouraged to write philosophical musings that guests could read. And the Scottish hermit of Hawkstone Park, a hired man who greeted visitors and shared poetic insights about nature. So these hermits embodied a rejection of materialism, inspiring visitors to contemplate life's deeper meanings. And you're probably thinking, Oliver, what does this have to do with anything on business apart from being kind of interesting and very, very crazy? A few thoughts. Obviously, as I said, this is kind of a precursor to the thought of having a design experience. So things like Disney, and even today, retail is still very much a design experience in the way that you go to an Apple store, everything is supposed to be sleek, modern, and innovative. That reinforces Apple's brand identity. And this is kind of a precursor to that. But it also made me think a lot about, are we hiring hermits today, people who do not really have a real role? They're just there as ornaments in a way. And I think actually a lot of companies are kind of guilty of that. We all want to be seen as being proactive in doing things. We want to be seen as taking proactive steps. And so sometimes we hire people and we don't give them the power and influence that they need to really affect change. A hermit can only read poetry, I guess. He can't really help you embrace nature. I have a few examples of this. The first is just one where it's probably done on purpose. So Elizabeth Holmes, I just recently watched that Netflix thing. She was the founder of Theranos. It was going to be a life-changing sort of cancer diagnosis thing with blood, but it was completely fraudulent. And she had many high-profile figures like Henry Kissinger and James Mattis onto her board, but none of them had medical or biotech experience. They were literally just there to give an illusion of legitimacy, and that company was later found out to be fraudulent. So maybe that was actually done on purpose. A couple more for you. So Google had an ethical AI, and it had a bit of controversy in 2020. So Timnit Gebru, hope I'm saying that right, was a well-respected AI ethics researcher, was hired to address fairness in AI. She was supposedly given a key role, but when she was raised concerns about Google's AI models, which were being biased, she was forced out, and it became clear that Google wanted the appearance of caring about AI ethics, but didn't want any actual change. I do think it's quite difficult sometimes if you're trying to change things from inside without sort of annoying the people that you're trying to influence. That's not always the case, and I don't know the ins and outs of that one, but that was the criticism, that they didn't really want to change anything they were doing. They just wanted the illusion of that. And interestingly, even the UK government has a similar thing. AI ethics chief in 2018, Roger Taylor, was appointed as chair of the UK Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. And it was critics pointed out that Taylor had no significant AI background, and the role was largely seen as government PR move to show that they were doing something about AI ethics. The organisation struggled to find its purpose, and little tangible action came from it, which is not particularly surprising. I mean, AI is not super new if you look into the background of it, but I would say that most people do not have experience in what will be the next stage of AI today. Another area where there was a lot of seemingly roles given with no power, no budget, no influence is DEI. So, in the wake of the George Floyd murder, a lot of major Fortune 500 companies hired chief diversity officers. And a recent study found that 60% of those roles have disappeared within a few years as companies quietly eliminated them after media pressure died down. And perhaps today, there is even media pressure against sort of hiring diversity in a weird way, that should be more based towards the role. And I'm not going to get into that in this video, but yeah, a lot of those roles were given with no power, no influence, so they couldn't really make any decisions. They were given vague targets and numbers to hit, but they couldn't really influence those companies there. I also think this is very, very true of data people. So quite often people they can't afford a full data team, and so they hire one or two people, and these people get stuck doing ad hoc requests, doing SSQL polls. They help businesses work dashboards and all this kind of thing, but they're not really advancing their organization forward with data. They're not really advancing or maturing their organization. They're just firefighting all the time. This is something I hear from internal data people all the time. They're just firefighting a lot of the time. They're fixing broken things. They're trying to stop the analytics team from building too many pipelines that the engineering team then get stuck with. They don't have the influence that they need to make a decision. And so companies do not get data driven at all. It's just there for the optics that, hey, we've got a data person. I can see they're doing all these things. But actually, if you were to get an external person to verify your maturity as an organization, you are not maturing. And this is even true of marketing people. I know in the past I've worked with so many organizations where they want growth from marketing. They want marketing to influence sales. But actually, when you come down to it, the role is more about stroking the stakeholders' egos and writing things for them and trying to give them you know, some time and effort. And it's more important to have a meeting with them every week to discuss marketing than it is to actually do things that will push the organization forward. Or even, hey, that person is too busy to give the information that I need, so I'm just going to take that on myself. I've seen that quite a few times. And so they're not really hired for the end goal of growing the organization. It's more the internal uh, optics of helping those people and stroking those people's egos and getting their names out there, maybe, which is certainly a part of growth, but it's not necessarily the end goal there. And so I think as business leaders, when we're hiring people, we have to be very careful that we're not hiring a hermit that is purely there for optics. It's purely there as, oh, look, we've got that person and they're doing that job. And yes, we've probably got some groundwork that are they making an impact, and we've got reviews that do that. But if you're not giving them the mandate to do that, if they've not got the influence to change the way that the company operates, which is the thing that I often come back to, people spend millions of pounds on research and data, and then they don't change the way that the company can actually operate, then it's completely pointless. It's completely pointless. So when you're thinking about people in your organization and you're thinking, well, is that person really doing that job? Am I actually giving them the power to make influential decisions, or are they there because I see them every day? They're in all the meetings. It looks as if they're doing things, but are we actually moving anywhere forward? Quite possibly you're only dealing with the day to day and you're not making progression. And so you have hired a hermit rather than somebody who will drive you to that next level. That's been my thought for the week. Hope you found that different and interesting. And would you hire a man to live in your back garden and give you poetic thoughts on nature? If so, I'm your man. Feed me twice a day. I don't mind.